I cast you into the time vortex. I sent you forward to your own death.
Instead, I found a home. I clung to your infernal machine, and for so many years, I hid.
Somehow, Sutek returned.
And that's a wrap. Season is over, done and dusted. The Doctor has defeated Sutek. Ruby has discovered her true mother and been reunited with her. Everyone is happy, and Mrs. Flood is standing on the roof talking directly to us. Pretty much par for the course for a Doctor Who finale. Lots of big events, lots of CGI, lots of emotional moments, but was it everything I hoped it would be? You know, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. Did my predictions come true? Mostly no, but a little bit, yes, a little bit. I'm happy with what I got right. The Doctor asks, if time is memory, then what is the memory of a time machine? And I think the answer to that is, it's a time machine. It was just a fun bit of theory crafting, some crazy wild ideas of what I thought could have happened. Of course, none of it did because Russell T Davies pulled the rug out from under us and had a revelation that really doesn't line up with any of the clues he laid out throughout the season. So we'll get into that. I'll talk about that a little bit more. Time to start talking about the finale of Doctor Who Series 14, Season 1. Yeah, let's dig into it. I like how it starts. Very epic and cinematic. The people melting into sand continue to be an effective and horrifying effect. And the massive amount of extras screaming and running or fleeing their vehicles as they were swallowed up by the sand felt realistic and made for some harrowing scenes of mass destruction, on par with some Hollywood big-budget disaster films. This was an effective opening that started things off with a bang. It's a shame that this threat would end on such a whimper. As soon as Kate Stewart, Rose, and the rest of the unit got dusted, I knew this was all going to be undone in the end. Much like several Doctor Who finales have ended. This did unfortunately remove a bit of tension from the rest of the story, as I knew all the deaths would eventually get undone. The look of the Remembered TARDIS is a fun, nostalgia-loaded Easter egg hunt. There's too many Easter eggs to list in one review, but I'll just point out a few I noticed. The 3rd Doctor's console in the ceiling, the 9th and 10th Doctor's console sticking out of the wall, the 13th Doctor console room elements on the floor like a campfire, 1st Doctor giant ceiling lamp haloing 15's head. Plus we get the 4th Doctor's scarf, 6th Doctor's coat, and 7th Doctor's question mark jumper. The moment where Mel found the 6th Doctor's coat on the coat rack and embraced it, that was really touching to me. That was a fun nostalgia-inducing moment, and it made me really happy that she was along for the ride in this story. She's fun and helpful and ties the Doctor to his past, without feeling like she's overshadowing or crowding out Ruby as the primary companion. She was used well as an ally to help the Doctor escape, then moving to assistant to fly the TARDIS, and then finally a surprise secret villain. I like the character and look forward to seeing her reappear here or on the impending unit spin-off. Sutek's explanation for how he escaped is lame.
Somehow, Sutek returned.
He just latched onto the TARDIS after being trapped in a supposedly inescapable time tunnel for all eternity. So the time tunnel he was trapped in was near, adjacent to the time vortex the TARDIS travels through? Or was it the same vortex the TARDIS travels through? That seems like a very irresponsible thing to leave him in. I assumed he was more in his own corridor that nothing and no one else had access to, you know? That seemed to be the status in the previous story. So this explanation is just a hand wave, not satisfying at all. It doesn't make any sense in my book. I was actually underwhelmed by the entire brief face-off that the Doctor had with Sutek. It just lacked impact, with the Doctor staring down a huge CGI dog rather than another real human being. And I'm sorry, but I'm just going to have to put on my grouchy old classic Doctor Who fan hat for this scene. It felt like a truncated greatest hits version of the classic confrontation that the Tom Baker Doctor and Sutek had back in 1975. The classic scene slowly builds the terror and dread, as Sutek breaks down the Doctor's resolve piece by piece, alternating between physical torture and psychological torment, toying with the Doctor like a cat with a mouse, and playfully debating their philosophical differences.
You use your powers for evil.
Evil? Your evil is my good. I am Sutek the Destroyer. Where I tread, I leave nothing but dust and darkness. I find that good.
Then I curse you, Sutek. In the name of all nature, you are a twisted abhorrence.
This new scene lacks any sort of tension on that level. The CGI Sutekh feels neutered, first delivering an unconvincing info dump about his escape, just sitting and watching the Doctor monologue about how he'll defeat him, sulking in silence when the Doctor calls him out, and then half-heartedly swiping at him before the Doctor just dips into the TARDIS and pieces out. This scene felt like a faint echo of the original, and I can't ignore it. Classic Doctor Who just did it better. The Doctor's reaction to the universe dying had a good build-up, and I like how it dawns on 15 in waves of increasing horror. First realizing that the Earth is dying several times over across time, then noting one after the other key planets that he's visited across his travels, reacting differently based off his relationships to each of them, as if he's hearing about the deaths of several good friends at once. Ncuti does a great job here, really making you feel the weight of the loss on a personal level. He imbues each planet with a different specific reaction, fitting his relationships to them, making him feel like the Doctor we've been following all these years. Just look at how it differentiates his reactions to the Ood Sphere versus the Daleks' home planet of Skaro.
The Ood Sphere. And Skaro.
The Daleks are dead.
Everything is dead.
I also like the scene of the woman losing her memory. It helped focus the massive, universe-shattering events down to the personal human level, showing the tragedy befalling a single human life. It took a dark turn when they revealed what had happened to her daughter, an effective gut punch to drive home the horror of Sutekh's actions, and propel the Doctor to rise to the occasion and defeat the monster.
Are you okay?
I think my daughter died, didn't she? And I forgot.
So in the end, it's revealed that Sutekh has not killed the Doctor yet because he, much like us, also wants to desperately find out who Ruby's mother is. So the villain of the story ends up being an over-obsessed Doctor Who nerd. I gotta say, I'm feeling kind of attacked here. And so what does he do? Unlike every other mystery the Doctor has encountered and then solved on his own without Sutekh's interference, Sutekh decides that now is the time, right before the Doctor solves this mystery that he desperately wants to know, now is the time for him to launch his universe-ending assault, thus making it incredibly difficult for the Doctor and Ruby to find the information he wants to find that is the only reason he's keeping his mortal enemy alive. This is actually pretty weak, I gotta say. So you're telling me that Sutekh latched onto the TARDIS centuries ago, he was there during Davros' plan to destroy the universe, he was there during the Cracks in Time mystery and the universe-ending TARDIS explosion, he was there during the Impossible Girl mystery. But this mystery, this one the Doctor started investigating, what, 6 months, a year ago? This is the one Sutekh desperately needs to know. And so what does he do? Unlike every other mystery the Doctor has encountered and eventually solved without interference, Sutekh decides to make his presence known and enact his universe-murdering revenge on the Doctor plan in the exact moment when the Doctor and Ruby are in the middle of researching answers to the mystery he desperately wants solved, thus interrupting the research and damaging the machine they were using. Then, months later, the Doctor and Ruby realize they can get the DNA records they need to solve the mystery in 2046 and barely make it there, having had the research severely upended by the robbery of their fully functional time machine and the destruction of the entire universe and even time itself now. Miraculously, this moment in time is fixed, and they do gain access to the records. But just as they are about to find the answer, and Sutekh could simply wait for Ruby to announce it out loud, or have his minion Mel simply read it off the same screen Ruby is looking at, he instead sabotages himself yet again with a massive unforced error, deciding that now is the perfect moment to interrupt the Doctor and Ruby with his puppet minion Mel, and have his greatest enemy hauled back to him before presenting him with the information in person. The villain whose main characteristic that enabled him to enact such a universe and time-spanning destructive scheme in the first place, the one who waits, is undone in the final days of his plan by being too impatient to let the Doctor and Ruby just find out the info he wanted to know without repeatedly interrupting and sidelining them. Intentionally ironic comeuppance for the villain, or inconsistent writing? You be the judge. Or I guess I will be, since I'm reviewing it right now, and yeah, it's the second one. It's inconsistent writing, that's what it is. The villain goes from evil super genius to super idiot during the course of this episode. I don't like the way they resolved the problem at all. Leashing Sutekh was a lame and unbelievable way to defeat the villain. They try to tie it all together with the molecular bond technobabble power that the Doctor introduced in the Church on Ruby Road with his intelligent gloves, and then later they also name drop it briefly in the Rogue episode. But the way that they acquire this rope is very convenient. They defeat the villain in the end essentially using a rope that was magically remembered inside of a TARDIS that they just happened to discover and find a use for. Is the implication that the Doctor created his intelligent rope at some point in the past off screen, and so it's in this memory TARDIS now? It just comes off way too convenient. This leash must have other powers as well, because when Sutekh is leashed by it, he suddenly seems to lose all of his godlike powers. Or he magically becomes incredibly stupid. Ruby is super lucky she didn't get her arm chomped off when she went for his neck with the leash. Okay, that's one. Secondly, why doesn't Sutekh just immediately enter the minds of Ruby and the Doctor and freeze them in place, stop them right there? 3, why doesn't Sutekh just use his green torture energy on the Doctor and Ruby like he just exhibited he could do a few seconds ago? 4, why don't his minions at least blow the death sand at the Doctor and Ruby, which seems to travel very quickly and could instantly melt them? You know, why are they slowly marching towards them with outstretched hands instead? The amount of time that Sutekh and his minions have to stop the Doctor and Ruby during this completely implausible chain of events is ridiculous, and it completely ruins any sort of tension, any sort of excitement you might be feeling in the moment because they're beating the bad guy, because it just comes off so unbelievable and easy. Just way too easy. Easy and out of nowhere. Like the episode was running out of time, they just wanted to sweep Sutekh aside, get him out of the way so they could do the real finale, Ruby's parentage and the departure of Ruby and the Doctor. Sutekh ends up feeling like a swept aside afterthought. I mean, this is just kind of embarrassing. I know he's a genocidal maniac and doesn't necessarily deserve respect, but this whole sequence just really undercut the threat of the villain altogether, in my opinion, making him feel like a complete joke for his final few moments on screen. Also, the Doctor totally killed Harriet Arbinger, didn't he? Like permanently killed. Vaporized. And she didn't come back when everyone else was undeaded at the end. They even make sure to show that the unit guy and advisor guy are back. But no Harriet Arbinger. Was she not a real person, like Susan Triad? She seemed normal until she was possessed by Sutekh. I know that they established that the Maestro's Harbinger was in on the plan. He was like an evil minion of the Maestro, a little demon or something, not a person. So maybe that's the connection. Maybe Harriet Arbinger was also just a demon for Sutekh, not a real person. But that's not clearly established, and what they show us on screen makes me think that she was a real person. In which case, it's just disturbing that the Doctor killed her and didn't think about it. I don't know. Just feels like a weird oversight that leaves a bad taste in my mouth. The Doctor drags Sutekh through the vortex, looking uncomfortably like the Doctor is performing an act of animal cruelty on a galactic level. Sutekh, unintentionally, begins dragging his claw along the side of the vortex, ripping a hole in our reality and apparently somehow using death to kill death across all of time and space, magically unsanding and bringing everyone back to life. Except for Harriet Arbinger. Okay. Well, that's certainly a way to resolve that problem. I knew they were going to have to reset everything in the end. I just didn't expect it to be so easy, convenient, nonsensical, all of the above. It's basically what I was afraid of. Russell T Davies has a penchant for ending his season finales with giant, ridiculous deus ex machinas, favoring emotional beats over internally logically consistent plotting or sound sci-fi concepts. His stories often devolve into magic and wish fulfillment by the end, and this story was no exception, unfortunately. This was a waste of a classic villain whose potential was not fully realized, in my opinion. Yes, we do get the epic breadth and scope of what a god of death is capable of delivering with 2024 special effects, but we didn't get the more intimate, disturbing one-on-ones between the Doctor and Sutekh that cemented him as such a creepy, memorable villain in the first place. He just feels like a generic, universe-killing cartoon character here. A Thanos minus the depth and gravitas. I don't mind that Ruby's mother was revealed to be just an ordinary woman, not a god or the TARDIS or something crazy like that. I just feel a bit cheated by the clues they presented along the way that ended up being just straight up lies or incredibly misleading in a way that I don't think a truly satisfying mystery would have done. Because it's not that they just feel misleading, they do feel like lies in retrospect. As in, they presented auditory and visual evidence in earlier episodes that end up just not making sense with the explanation we're given in this final episode. The Doctor explicitly said that his memory was changing.
The memory changed. She was pointing at me.
He didn't see Ruby's mother turn and point dramatically in the church on Ruby Road. He saw that later in Space Babies. He also said that the snow bleeding through reality was something he'd never experienced in all of his time traveling through time and space before. And the cherry on top is the lamppost they explicitly show us in the time window scene, but neglect to include the sign on the post, which magically appears in the revelation in the next episode. That's just visual cheating in my book. A lot of these mysterious clues simply don't make sense now, given the very ordinary ordinary non-supernatural or timey-wimey explanation we were given. Instead, it is just a plot hole. She simply must have always pointed, but the Doctor did not notice or mention that she pointed the first time. And then Ruby has this line, which I just found ridiculous.
I always thought it was called Ruby because the social workers chose it, or the paramedics or whatever, but no, it was her.
No, Ruby, you're wrong. It was the workers who named you. They're the ones who named you Ruby. I'm assuming based off the fact that you were found on Ruby Road, but they named you. They're the ones who gave you the name that you legally have now. Just because your mom pointed to the sign and no one saw her do that, doesn't mean that she named you. Also, the Doctor's conclusion is an enormous stretch. There's no way for him to know that that's why she's pointing at the sign, or that she is necessarily pointing at the sign. This is just an inference of his. Supernatural and strange events that occur throughout the season that don't feel like this explanation gels with, that is just swept under the rug in the final few moments here by Shudigawa's honestly kind of irritating monologue. Shudi's explanation as to why all this happened, it basically feels like RTD is speaking through the Doctor's dialogue to tell us, the viewers, to just be cool with the very flimsy explanation he's given us as the answer to the mystery. I don't have any problem with the revelation as far as from a storytelling perspective. It's actually refreshing that they have not done yet another Impossible Girl, center of the universe, chosen one storyline, you know? I can see why RTD would have thought this was clever to subvert our expectations that it was another magical girl chosen one storyline and then reveal she's actually just an ordinary person. I like that in theory, but the way we got here was so laden with cheats and lies. This feels like the writer knows he kind of cheated us, so he is putting in some dialogue that paves over everything, wallpapers over all the plot holes and inconsistencies he planted that would have led you down the path of thinking that Ruby's mother was something special in the first place. And I know there's going to be people online who are going to be like, this all makes sense. It's the time window memory machine. That's sending out the waves and the snow and the distorted memories and all of that. That's all explained by the time window. And as far as them not being able to recognize the mother, that's because of the perception filter from the TARDIS, the 73-hour perception filter. It's blocking our ability to see her. I see that that's planted there too, but I don't buy it, because I don't think that's really explicitly said or presented in a plausible way. So I am not impressed by RTD's seeding of the mystery this season at all. I think it's one of the sloppiest, laziest mystery boxes the series has done, to be quite frank. This feels like a season-long version of the alien neck-cracking scene with Ruby in the Rogue episode, where she's pretending to be an alien but isn't really an alien, and yet for no reason at all, we hear the alien neck cracking and like warbling noises playing over her, even though she's not an alien. So it's just cheap. I feel like this whole season just pulled that trick.
She looks good on you.
The unfortunate result of stoking the fires of intrigue and speculation with false clues, however, is that when you do get to the end and roll out the big reveal, it's not satisfying to the viewer because it doesn't make sense. The pieces don't feel like they perfectly fall into place. You don't get that big aha moment that makes you feel like it all makes sense and could only have ever been this way, yet somehow you missed it due to the clever writing. You just feel disappointed and confused because it doesn't add up. I don't hate the reveal here, and I do get genuine warm emotions seeing Ruby reunited with her mother. But the ending is muted a bit for me due to how nonsensical the clues are leading up to this conclusion. It's just not satisfying. To touch on something I genuinely did like a lot more, the scene between Ruby and her mother in the coffee shop was beautiful. It was very short and simple, but I felt like it elegantly communicated the feelings and emotions of both the characters beautifully in a very efficient manner. Both actors give excellent, believable performances, and I think this is especially a standout moment for Millie Gibson.
You left me where I was safe, and I just want to say thank you. I'm so sorry.
The scene was a true tearjerker, and the biggest feeling of catharsis this entire episode elicited in me. It feels like the emotional conclusion that Ruby's character deserves this season. And then we get the final scene between the Doctor and Ruby. Again, this scene is very touching, although I don't feel like it hits quite as hard as it should. Due to the truncated nature of the season, plus a couple of episodes where the two main characters are barely on screen together at any point, I feel like this end scene is trying to sell a relationship that I don't feel like quite blossomed to the level that they are saying it had by this point. I feel like for a lot of the season, I was being told that Ruby and the Doctor are best friends without really seeing it manifest that many times.
At the party, I saw you with that woman.
My best friend.
And I felt like the relationship at times felt a little bit generic, a little bit cookie cutter doctor and companion rather than a more specific connection. It showed sometimes. There were moments, especially when they bonded over being orphans and their feelings of loss, or when Ruby comforted the Doctor after he lost Rogue. These are moments where I saw the real true friendship shine through, but I feel like they were a bit too far and in between for the level of closeness that they have evolved to by the end of the story. So it comes out feeling a bit empty, more like an idea of a scene than a genuinely earned moment. Nonetheless, it's extremely well acted by our two leads, and the exiting line from Ruby, followed by the Doctor's Han Solo-esque lack of reciprocation, was a truly heartbreaking moment.
I love you.
His smile as she leaves, followed by the look of devastation he has once she's closed the door, reflects the core of his character. A man who smiles through the pain, openly weeping for others, but hiding the deepest wounds, the ones that hurt him personally, behind a mask of devil-may-care bravado, always running on to the next adventure as fast as possible, rather than daring to confront and deal with his emotions. In essence, he's still the exact same man that he was as the 14th Doctor, a man running himself ragged to avoid confronting his pain. I think the Doctor has a long road ahead of him when it comes to truly confronting his past, his origins, everything he's lost, and everything he could rediscover if he dares to try. Maybe that will be the 15th Doctor's arc in the end. Or maybe they'll keep kicking the can down the road for the next couple of decades. Regardless, Ncuti sells the scene well, much like he has all season long. The quality level of the episodes has fluctuated intensely all season, but the one constant has been Ncuti Gatwa's stellar performance in the role. He feels like someone who truly gets the Doctor, what he stands for, what he's gained and lost in his life, his blind spots, his dark side, his empathy, his eccentric sense of humor, and even his arrogance and at times out of control ego and recklessness are all present and accounted for. He feels like an actor who has researched the character and knows his own history and past, embodying all of the past Doctor's journeys within himself while also stepping forward with a fresh, charming, charismatic, extremely extroverted, and deeply empathetic take on the Doctor that just feels right and is a joy to watch in every scene. Millie Gibson was also really good in this, as she has been all season, and she has some of her series' best moments in this episode. I really felt for her plight, trying to find out who her mother was, and it is satisfying to see her actually get a happy ending for once, unlike the semi-tragic fates that befell most modern companions. And then we get that strange final voiceover before the reveal that Mrs. Flood is up on the roof, dressed in a strangely whimsical outfit, talking directly to us through the camera. She leaves us with ominous portends of terror for the Doctor, stoking the flames of speculation for who this villain could possibly be. Well, based on how reliable R2D's clues have been for this past season, I think I'm going to refrain from going so deeply into the theory crafting on this upcoming season. But I will just point out the most obvious clue here, the one they definitely want us to pick up on. Her outfit, which bears an unmistakable similarity to a certain character from classic Doctor Who.
Careful, these steps are treacherous.
So not the Ronnie, but another time lady potentially, Romana. Whether this turns out to be an essential clue or another fake-out remains to be seen, but I can't deny that I'm intrigued. Damn it, Russell, you hooked me again! Every time I try to get out, you keep pulling me back in! So in the end, the season comes to close with an uneven finale. At times epic, exciting, and genuinely touching, but also pretty unsatisfying in terms of revelations and the answers to the mysteries they've stoked our speculation with all season. And a waste of a personal favorite classic villain. It's not as bad as some finales have been in the past, but it's not amongst his best either, not by a long shot. And I think it's one of the weakest executions of a returning classic villain Modern Who has ever done. I'm going to give this finale a C+, and also downgrade the first part to a C+ as well. It had some great moments, and some series highlight performances from both of the leads, but fell short in several other areas, and was genuinely disappointing at times. I'm not crushed by this. I was kind of bracing for it, based off of just my knowledge of Russell T Davies and how he handles finales. Doctor Who in general, whether it's RTD or Moffat or Chibnall, has struggled with its finales. I would say, on balance, a Doctor Who season sort of falls on its face about 50% of the time in the final episode or so. This doesn't kill me. I wish it were better, but especially probably because I came from the classic era. I've always taken Doctor Who as more of a sci-fi anthology series, just a series of fun, bite-sized adventures. They run from 45 minutes to an hour and a half, and they explore some cool concept, some new world, some period in the past or future, and you're in and you're out and you have a complete satisfying story in that one thing. Just a piece of entertainment that you could recommend to a friend. You know, go check out Blink if you want. It's only 45 minutes long. It's a really cool sci-fi horror story, right? And I think that's what Doctor Who has always excelled at, delivering a handful, maybe like half to 2/3 of the season are good to great, cool sci-fi fantasy stories. And then there's some mediocre to bad stories. And then the finale is really a toss-up. It's either going to be fine, maybe good, but probably just fine to bad. The show garners its energy and its fan base based off of the extremely charismatic and lovable Doctor and companion, the leads, and the cool, trippy adventures they go on. That's what I watch Doctor Who for. The finales almost always inevitably disappoint me. They usually just bite off more than they can chew, is what it seems like. It seems like the writers write themselves into a corner, make a disastrously massive universe-ending event occur, and then there's no real satisfying way to put the genie back into the bottle, to pull everything back and reset things back to normal where you can have a happy ending that's not a massive tragedy. I would just say this was an extremely aggressively mediocre finale for the season, which isn't great because that means that now the season really feels like it has a very weak beginning, it has a mediocre ending, and it has really strong episodes mixed into the middle of it. As far as overall season opinions, I will be covering that more thoroughly in one final video that I'll be dropping sometime next week. My thoughts on overall on the season as a whole, how successfully do I feel like this accomplished RTD's goal of making a massive global launch and reaching a wider audience, and do I feel like this is a successful soft reboot since they're calling it season 1, and then I'll do a ranking of all the episodes. We'll do ranks, which is always fun. It's always fun to put things in an order and number them and say this is the best and this is the worst. We'll be doing that as well. So I'll be seeing you next week with a more thorough conclusion for the whole season where I will talk about everything. It's been quite a journey, and I thank you all for sticking with me and watching the reviews over these past several weeks. I've had a blast doing it. The channel has grown immensely due to your viewership and word of mouth and the algorithm and everything, I assume. So thank you for that. And just one last thing, moving forward after this next review video, I'll talk a little bit more in depth in that video about what my future plans are. But just in short, I do plan on continuing to make Doctor Who content, Doctor Who videos, classic episode reviews. I'll keep going with that, with the Tom Baker era. I'm considering starting with the New Who era, starting with Christopher Eccleston, and maybe alternating between those, you know, doing a classic story and then a New Who story every other week. I think I'm going to do more villain explainers because those are really fun for me, do a deep dive on the television history of villains or characters. Since Romana very clearly is being referenced at the end of this story, maybe it's time to do a Romana history video. Maybe I'll be doing that in the near future.
My name is Ramana Dvaratna Lunda.
I'm so sorry about that. Is there anything we can do?
There's a lot more down the road, so please stay tuned. And, you know, if you haven't yet, I always forget to say this in the videos, but, you know, like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this video or any of my videos in the series so far. And I will see you next week for the season retrospective video. Thank you guys for sticking with me and watching all these episodes, all of my grousing and complaints and praises and so forth. I appreciate having someone to listen to me as I ramble on forever, but I'm going to cut the rambling right now until next week. So until then, Kay, signing out.